How do you teach leash manners or get a dog to listen when they're having issues with the leash? Question stems from the idea that the leash is a safety tool, not a communication tool. The answer to the question of how do we teach leash manners depends on why the dog is struggling on the leash in the first place. I work with dysregulated dogs whose baseline stress levels are higher than ideal. They're likely to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, a trauma disorder, a hyperarousal disorder. My clients are often pulling on leash because their bodies are adrenalized. My clients are often pulling on leash because it takes a lot of mental work in the thinking brain to walk on a short leash in a tight space at the same pace as the person who's walking you. And they don't have the mental capacity to do that because they're much more in their sympathetic nervous system. It's very much like it would be very difficult to do math problems if we were being chased by a lion. Dysregulated dogs often have comorbid health issues, and so it's also true that for many of my clients, it feels better in their body to go faster. And on a traditional 4-foot or 6-foot leash, that means that they're pulling if they're trying to go the pace that feels best in their body. And then pulling on leash tends to increase arousal, and so we're snowballing in the wrong direction. And then we might see other dogs who are not dysregulated at all, but they're very excited about the environment and the leash is really short and it doesn't give them the space they need to explore that environment appropriately. And we may have an appropriately long leash that allows the dog to move their body at a pace that feels good to them, but we need to reinforce the behavior of walking on it while it's loose and not pulling. I will say that I very rarely work on leash manners directly with my clients. Typically, the work we're doing to help the dog feel safer in their body naturally lends itself to the dog walking on a loose leash by the time we're through our work together. The big thing for these dogs is to get their stress levels down and to investigate how they're feeling physically in their body. And then, of course, setting up the environment correctly. So making sure that we're walking them in an environment where they can stay in that learning brain, making sure that the leash is long enough for them to move their body appropriately, making sure that we're not accidentally doing things that encourage pulling on leash, like pulling back on the leash ourselves. As part of that work, some of the operant behavior we're doing, I think, lends itself well to loose leash walking as well. So we are doing things like capturing check-ins. So when the dog orients towards us, we mark and treat. I also like the circle method, specifically for its ability to help dogs self-regulate, but that can also be really helpful to teach loose leash walking. If the focus is loose leash walking, and the dog is not dysregulated, we're not dealing with anxiety or hyperarousal, it can be really helpful to start teaching loose leash walking in the house, often without a leash, and just practice reinforcing the dog for walking at your side as you move around the room together by making it a game. Pattern games can be a lot of fun to help teach this. And then we can add in the leash, and then we want to just slowly increase the level of distraction. And we want to make sure that the dog's needs are satiated before we're asking them to do this work. So we don't want to take them to a novel environment and ask them to immediately ignore their curiosity and do something that might not feel very fun. Instead, we can let them explore, let them sniff, let them get familiar with the environment. And once their physical, mental, social, sensory, species typical needs are met, then ask them to take treats close by our body. But remember, the leash is there for safety. It's not there to communicate anything to the dog. And our dog doesn't have a concept of the leash as a communication device or as a safety device. They just know that suddenly their movement is being restricted. And when we think of it that way, dogs are actually pretty good-natured about the whole thing.